I'm not afraid of the robot because I really believe as humans we're meant to be creators, not meant to be machines. And AI is going to help us to redefine ourselves. And one of the challenges I have heard is the biggest challenge we have in society is we need to help people re-educate. And who has that role? Is it government? Is it corporate? Is it yourself? In terms of reinventing yourself. And that's a big challenge for a lot of people, is reinventing themselves. Um, so they, excuse me, so they don't get replaced by a robot, which is just going to take away their boring job that they most really hate at any rate. Um, but we need to skill them up. So what do you think about that area of skills in terms of helping people move to their next, reinvent themselves?
You've now hit on a very passionate subject for me. When we look historically, we'll take the US, for example. Over a 100-year period, we went from being a 75% agrarian society to 25%. So 75% of the population were farmers, and 100 years later, only 25%. And we know today it's even smaller. And when we think about that, grossly, we think, well, this is a good thing. When 75% of the population was just farming and they weren't very productive, we didn't have people to go be in factories or to be social media managers and do all this other stuff we benefit from. So as we remove them from farming, because farming became more productive, and so fewer farmers can feed more of us, we freed them up to deliver more value. Now, acutely, there were certain farmers who said, my farm is going under, this is bad, right? And they had a bad time. As we had this mass migration take place over 100 years, it happened literally over generations. And so some farms failed each year, but it was a small enough number that we said, not good, but we as a society could handle that many farmers losing their jobs, and their children would go on and pick other professions that delivered more value. We've seen with the blue-collar workforce in factories, we saw factories peak mid-century in the US and start to decline. And there again, it's happened over a faster period, and we've certainly seen cases where town, they lose a factory and they lose a lot of jobs, and it hits an economic impact. What's happening, what we've all seen with technology, it accelerates the pace of change, right? How quickly change hits us. And one of the fears that we have as a society is driverless cars, because the belief is that if a driverless car comes out, and I'm going to pick 2030. I'm actually probably less optimistic than most people on driverless cars, but let's pretend it 2030, we say, great, we've proven it works. All the laws are in place, we're ready to go. The first one rolls off the factory for public use. Within about 5 years, maybe 10, we've now replaced the majority of rideshare drivers, of truck drivers, maybe even some bus drivers. And so now over not multiple generations, not over decades, but over a few years, millions of people get displaced. And that's something that our society can't handle as easily. Now, I picked rideshare as an example, but we're going to see this, of course, in different areas. We're going to see, we'll take lawyers as an example. I mentioned that before. If now lawyers, instead of looking at 25 cases, only look at 8, maybe only look at 5, if some of the writing that they do can be automated or some of the checking, we suddenly need less lawyers for what we do. What happens to all these people who spend $100,000 getting a law degree? We have to find ways to take people in society as we do these transitions, as their whole industry shifts and the jobs are not coming back. We as society have to invest in retraining them for other skills. And it's not quite as simple as, oh, go learn to program. I hear there are programmers, or there's a need for that. It has to align to what their interests are, their geography, where they're based, what skills they can bring over from where they were. I helped do some of this in 2010. New York City's Economic Development Council funded a program because we saw lots of people displaced in the Great Recession, and we knew their jobs weren't coming back. In fact, one of the other big challenges, when you had someone who had been working at, for example, Citicorp, a company of 30,000 people, and now we're getting them a job at a startup of 30 people, there's even a cultural shift. They're very used to, okay, well, let's have the pre-meeting before we have the meeting with legal to get the approval so we can consider doing this 6-month project. When you're in a company of 30 people, you go, hey, Bob, what about doing this? Bob says, yeah, I like it. Let's do it. That was it. That was your 6-month cycle down to a 6-second conversation. But that's a cultural shift. It's not about any formal education or training. It's a cultural shift that they might not be used to. So to handle all this, to go to your question, who's responsible? Well, first, the individual. We always have to take responsibility for our careers because no one's more committed to them than us.
We do.
But second, I think we do have to get some help from the government, federal, state, at a societal level. And it's not just about, okay, money for programs. It's about things like, what if we have a standard practice that every 10 years, you go back to school for 6 months? That's your macro training. You'll continue to learn each year, but maybe it's normal to go to school for 6 months. Do we have some type of loan program to help offset that tuition? That might be something that's state funded. And then, of course, our schools themselves have to have different types of educational programs that are more for a lifetime of continual learning and not you're 22 and done. Best of luck. Please remember to give us a donation. It has to be a lifetime engagement.